Guten Tag, herzlich willkommen im Verteidigungsministerium.
Welcome to the Ministry of Defense, where the cabinet has met today. We will hear from the Federal Chancellor, then our Minister of Defense, and our guest, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who will give a statement, and we'll have time for Q&A.
Secretary General Mark Rutte, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to the NATO Secretary General, and I would like to thank the Federal Minister of Defense for his hospitality to host you here today. We have had the 50th cabinet meeting of the federal government today, and for the second time we met at the Federal Ministry of Defense. As you know, since last year we have one cabinet meeting a year that takes place at the Federal Ministry of Defense to talk about security policy issues. And last year we had SACEUR, General Grinkovich, with us as a guest. Today, Mark Rutte joined us, the Secretary General of NATO. And I would like to say this once again, Mark, thank you very much for coming to Berlin, and thank you for the excellent cooperation that we enjoy within NATO. And I'm grateful that we had the opportunity today to also talk to each other at the cabinet meeting and demonstrate that the topics we discuss within NATO are important to the cabinet as well. I would like to thank the staff of the Ministry of Defense, the soldiers here, for the excellent preparation and the hospitality, because there would be no place more suitable than this house to discuss security policy matters. We chose this date deliberately because next week we will have the NATO summit in Ankara. We are engaged in intensive preparations. As you know, last week I received my E5 colleagues in Berlin, the French President, the Italian Prime Minister, the Polish Prime Minister, and the British Prime Minister. We talked about the topics in depth, and I also coordinated with Mark Rutte via a phone call, who had just had a meeting at the Oval Office. So after the E5 meeting, I was able to brief both the American President and the NATO Secretary General. On Friday this week, I will host a meeting with my Baltic counterparts, my colleagues from Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, because we want to send out a message of unity and strength as European partners ahead of the NATO summit. We want to give NATO a more European dimension. As Europeans, we are assuming more responsibility. We are reducing unilateral transatlantic dependencies, and in any circumstances, it is the right decision to take for both sides of the Atlantic. Part of this is that we strongly step up our defense spending. By 2029, Germany will already reach the 3.5% goal that we have agreed in The Hague 3 years earlier than we had set ourselves as a goal within NATO. We will implement this together. We want no one to go it alone. We want a transatlantic and European cooperation. We want our neighbors to feel safer when Germany becomes stronger, when Germany builds up its armed forces and firmly enshrines its armed forces and defense industry into NATO. In Ankara, we want to send out a strong message of support for Ukraine. And the federal government suggests that we, as European NATO allies, not make another financial pledge for Kiev, and we hope that Moscow draws the right conclusions from this. We will not waver in our support for Ukraine. And we hope to see Russia willing to engage in negotiations and talks soon. And it is only Moscow that has so far refused to talk. We, the Europeans and NATO members, the Ukrainian president, have documented our willingness to talk several times. It is now up to Putin to engage in these talks and end this war. The NATO summit will also deal with this situation in the Middle East. We continue to help reaching a lasting peace between Washington and Tehran. Our common goal remains an end to the Iranian nuclear program and a permanent opening of the Strait of Hormuz. As you can see, there are many tasks in terms of foreign and security policies ahead, so we need strong armed forces and also a resilient society. This has also been discussed in detail in today's cabinet meeting, and I would like to briefly mention 3 decisions we have taken in cabinet. Firstly, we have adopted a bill to accelerate the build-up of the infrastructure for the Bundeswehr. Secondly, we adopted a bill on strengthening the reserve. We need our reservists. We want a bigger reserve that stands ready. It will become an essential part of the Bundeswehr. And thirdly, we have agreed on key points for amending the emergency control and emergency preparedness legislation. This is important in terms of a comprehensive security concept that is including the population and civil protection, and also security of supply both for the population and the armed forces. So we're speeding up our work. This is necessary in a situation where we as Europeans need to quickly and resolutely shoulder responsibility for our freedom and security and prosperity. To wrap up, Mark, thank you very much. Germany can count on NATO, and NATO can count on Germany too. Thank you very much for coming to Berlin today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again in a few days' time in Ankara.
Thank you and a warm welcome. Chancellor Mark Rutte, I am pleased to have had the second cabinet meeting here at the Ministry of Defense, and in these times it is an important message that the security situation means challenges not just for us as in the armed forces, but really for the entirety of Germany. As I said, it was our second meeting here, and it was great to have you, Mark, here. Thank you very much for your important role, and thank you for really stepping up for NATO around the world. So we've done a lot over the past years. We are in a much better position than a few years ago. We are ready for crisis. The Bundeswehr is building up. We're procuring a lot of material, and we are building infrastructure, but there's still a lot to do. The Chancellor mentioned the Reserve Strengthening Act and the Bundeswehr Infrastructure Acceleration Act, and also our important emergency control and emergency preparedness legislation. About the Reserve Strengthening Act, the old rules to strengthen the reserves were really dispersed. We had many different laws, and they were geared towards what troops need in times of international crisis management operations and not for national and collective defense. In this new situation, we need a new view of the reserve. By 35, we will need 260,000 active troops and at least 200,000 reservists. And now with this new act, we are going next steps. A reserve that is fully integrated in active troops, and that will be appropriately valued. We also want our reservists to be able to learn new skills, to develop their qualifications, so that they can also work on new systems. And this act is geared toward all of that. We need more reservists, I said that. We want to get rid of double voluntariness. So far, both the employer and the reservists had to agree to reserve service. Now we want to have obligatory reserve service. This will depend on the prior terms of service in the Bundeswehr and also on the age of the reservists. We will also contact employers sooner, so the call-up notice will be issued at least eight weeks prior to service. And of course, there will be a hearing and we will take the employer's considerations into account, and there will be opportunities for the employers to be reimbursed for additional costs incurred. Just a few words about the new kind of conscription. This is really certainly this new law now does not mean that service volunteers will automatically become part of the reserve. So not even for those military service volunteers who are serving now, or our new our conscripts up to 2011. What is important is, though, that we need a proper registration system, because if we don't know who our former those who left the forces are, then we can't call them out for reserve service. So we will register former personnel. We will issue questionnaires so that we have a good, solid registration system for reserve forces. About infrastructure, we are amending about 10 laws to speed up infrastructure for the Bundeswehr. We are investing more and more into infrastructure. And to ensure this for the future as well, and to become even speedier, especially in terms of accommodation, but also ammunition depots and logistics for new weapon systems, we need faster processes. We are creating those. I am very, very grateful to the Federal Minister of the Environment for the excellent cooperation on this draft law that we presented together. Some compromises were not easy, but we've decided on temporary limitation of some rules, and this is very, very important, so thank you. Mark, we're doing all we can to strengthen our operational readiness as the biggest NATO partner in Europe, all this in the spirit of national and collective defense. We have assumed much greater responsibility over the past years. Brigade in Lithuania, Air Police starting in America, in Estonia, and the German-Netherlands Corps, which is assuming leadership and command responsibility, and so on and so forth. So we are looking forward to the NATO summit next week, and I'm very grateful for this exchange today, briefing by the Chief of Defense. We had an important exchange on the emergency control and preparedness legislation. We are doing more for our conventional collective and defense. We are strengthening the resilience of our economy and our society as a whole, and we are making it very clear that our armed forces can only be as good as the country that stands behind it. Thank you very much.
Herr Bundeskanzler, lieber Friedrich, Herr Bundesverteidigungsminister, lieber Boris, thank you for the warm welcome. And it's always a pleasure to be in Berlin. And this is my message. Germany leads and Germany delivers. And the NATO summit in Ankara next week will also be all about delivery. Delivering increased defense spending, more defense production, and strong support for Ukraine. I had the honor today to join the meeting of the cabinet, the engine of a government that is powering ahead on defense spending. Germany is on track to invest 3.5% of GDP in defense by 2029. And that's an extraordinary achievement. It takes political courage, resolve, and conviction to do this. Increasing defense investment means making tough decisions. But it is the right thing to do when we face a more dangerous world. The summit next week will focus on turning extra spending into combat-ready capabilities and significantly scaling up our defense industries. Germany is an industrial powerhouse with major defense companies and world-class research institutions. NATO's message to industry across the alliance is clear. Be ready, speed up, work together, open new production lines, expand supply chains, and deliver quickly what we need to our security. Deterrence is built in factories as much as is projected by our armed forces. NATO is and will always be a transatlantic alliance, but we need to rebalance it for the better, as you already said, Friedrich. Working closely with the United States, European allies and Canada are taking greater responsibility for conventional defense in Europe. Germany already makes strong contributions to our shared security. Only yesterday, indeed, the 1st German-Netherlands Corps took on the role of a technical headquarters on NATO's eastern flank for NATO ground forces in Estonia and Latvia. Germany's new armored brigade, permanently stationed in Lithuania, recently held its first large-scale combat drills. German aircraft, indeed, support Baltic air policing to keep our airspace safe. And at sea, the German Navy plays an indispensable role in protecting critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. Germany is a leader on Ukraine. You are the strongest supporter in Europe committed to uphold its freedom and uphold its sovereignty. The command that coordinates security assistance and training for Ukraine is in Wiesbaden. And you co-chair the Ukraine Defense Contract Group, bringing allies and partners together to provide urgent military aid for Ukraine. At the summit next week, allies will commit to provide sustainable, predictable and long-term security assistance for Ukraine, and here I welcome the strong German leadership on this issue. We agree we must keep up the pressure on Russia. Even when its war against Ukraine ends, Russia will remain a long-term threat to Euro-Atlantic security. The global security environment is complex and is volatile. Look at how Iran tried to hold the world economy hostage by blocking the Strait of Hormuz. I welcome commitments by allies to ensure freedom of navigation through the strait. Chancellor Merz, Minister Pistorius, Germany, Europe and North America have always been stronger together in NATO. By investing more in defense, strengthening industry and bring innovative new systems, we will remain fit for the future. And this is how we will stay safe in a more dangerous world. So, lieber Friedrich, lieber Boris, wir sehen uns nächste Woche in Ankara. Ich freue mich drauf.
Sehr gut, vielen Dank. Danke, ich habe gerade erfahren, wir haben 10 Minuten für Fragen und Antworten. Herr Rinke.
I just heard that we have 10 minutes for Q&A. Mr. Rinke.
Kommt.
Chancellor, Minister Pistorius, I have a question about German-US armament cooperation. There are reports that the federal government is discussing with the US government which US weapons will be produced under license in Germany. But don't the Europeans want to become more independent from the US? So could you maybe say a few words about this apparent contradiction? And the coalition committee, a question on that. What about a big tax package?
Ich fange gerne an. Also es ist in der Tat nur ein vermeintlicher Widerspruch.
Well, this is only an apparent contradiction because we never said that we want to do without American systems, even though we want to become more independent. That is simply not the case. We're cooperating very closely with the European defense industry and we will continue that cooperation. We don't have certain systems, not yet, but we will need them in the next 10 to 15 years. We will need them urgently. We also know that the US has limited production capacity, and this capacity must be expanded, and this is why we are very, very interested in acquiring licenses for certain systems that will then be produced in Germany. For example, parts of the body of the F-35. So these two points are not mutually exclusive. We want to become more independent, but we don't want to do without closer cooperation with the US. I can only agree with that. We do have cooperation agreements with the United States of America. There is very, very close defense cooperation, which is in our mutual interest. And of course, we do want to become more independent, and yet we still intend to see cooperation with the US when it is in our interest, and the US seek the cooperation with us as well, and we're happy about that. About the coalition committee, we will need some time this afternoon to discuss the topics on the agenda. Right now, what is important is strengthening the competitiveness of our economy, create better conditions for that. We will make some proposal modernizing and digital transformation of our state, then taxes and labor protection rules.
Carsten Hoffmann, DPA.
Carsten Hoffmann, you mentioned the NATO summit. What will you do to keep strengthening the European pillar in NATO? And what about dealing with criticism by President Trump, are you planning to respond diplomatically, like the Chief of Defense, or in much clearer terms, like Giorgia Meloni? And what will it depend on? What will the success hinge on?
Also Sie werden mir nachsehen, dass ich jetzt keine Details der Vorbesprechungen, die andauern.
Well, you will bear with me when I tell you that I can't go into too great a detail of our preparations to the summit, but we will discuss a whole range of proposals this afternoon. I hope we won't conclude too late tonight, and we will present these proposals to the press tomorrow. I do expect that we will make a big, great leap ahead in terms of modernization of our country. We will focus on competitiveness, and we will do whatever we can to ensure that industry can invest and private households can keep spending money and consume. This will not be our last coalition committee meeting. We will have to make further decisions, and I've said it over and over again. There's not the one big bang. Not today, not tomorrow. We are going through a process that is being accelerated. But anyway, we will present the proposals tomorrow. On the NATO summit, there is no contradiction. We are all working on European interests together. Giorgia Meloni visited Berlin last week. Boris Pistorius said NATO has to become more European in order to remain transatlantic, and I believe that that is very true. We haven't done enough in the past years. And we're doing more now, not just to reach some mythical figure that the US president has set, but we are doing it in our own interest because we think it is the right thing to do, it is a necessary thing to do. And the US is an equal partner, one of 32 NATO partners, but we are coordinating closely with the European NATO partners and with Canada, so we are quite confident when it comes to next week. We will tell the US that they depend on us, we depend on them, and together we are ready and able to defend ourselves. Question, Mrs. Trans. A question to the minister. The new conscription model and the reserve mean that Germany is leaving this paradigm of voluntary service behind. So this is really, this new Reserve Act is also part of the Zeitenwende. Could you talk about this meta level? How optimistic are you that the German society will accept more mandatory elements of the reserve? Of course, I'd be happy to. I have a very positive idea of the social response. So the questionnaires that are being sent out to those who just turned 18 are not intended to recruit them, most of all, but to register these people, because 18-year-olds are usually still in school, and we don't, of course, want to keep them from that, but really we want to register them and want to keep in touch. But still, there are over 500 18-year-olds who have committed to military service. And about the reserve, we tell all our new recruits that they will be part of the reserve. Those who came before them won't be. But it does not seem that that is deterring anyone, because anyone who decides to render military service knows that armed forces can only work if there's regular training, there's an active and strong reserve. So I am quite optimistic about their response in society. Herr Schubler, CNN.
Herr Chancellor, Minister, Secretary General, given all of the rhetoric that comes from the United States and from the White House, NATO 3.0, the stopping of funding, is it not now down only to the Europeans for the defense of Ukraine?
Well, when it comes to the defense of Ukraine, the US is still indispensable. The flow of key support from the United States into Ukraine continues, paid for by Canadians and Europeans, and I think that's only fair. This is this famous Pearl program. And these are, for example, the interceptors for the Patriot systems protecting the critical infrastructure in Ukraine, energy infrastructure, the inner cities, and only the US can do this at scale, and is still doing that. And helping in so many other ways, not always to be disclosed in a press conference. So it is end-to-end. Europe is massively supporting Ukraine in money and in support and in defense industrial output. Look at Germany when it comes to what Germany is doing bilaterally, but also through the Czech Ammunition Initiative and other initiatives, and also investing in defense industrial base in Ukraine. So that's Europe, but also the US, and we need both. It is really end-to-end.
Vielen Dank. Jetzt haben wir noch Zeit für eine Abschlussfrage.
A brief comment on that. We had a very intensive debate on that during the G7 meeting in Evian. And look what we had concluded in our leader statement at the end of this meeting, which was very clear. And the US President was with us, and he signed the document. And so this is the clear position of those who are combined in G7. And that is something which we can rely on when we are having this meeting of NATO next week.
Dann ist die Frau Fürsten.
Ms. Fürsten.
Hi, Herr Bundeskanzler.
Chancellor, Minister Pistorius, I have a question for each of you. You all mentioned Iran. Is it typical for this kind of thing to be on the agenda at the NATO summit? Trump's plan mentions $300 billion for reconstruction of Iran. Would Germany contribute to that? And what about the Fulda and the Tender Mosul that are near Djibouti? Will they come back, or will we wait until after the summer? What I can say for now is we are hoping for the end of combat and for an agreement beyond the existing MOU. We have been saying that we are willing to support, including militarily, and ensure a free Strait of Hormuz. And when it comes to reconstructing infrastructure in the region, we could also discuss that. But first of all, combat has to stop. And then we, of course, will make a contribution, because that is in our own economic interest to at least rebuild energy infrastructure, because that contributes to security of supply in Germany.
Sie wissen, dass unsere beiden Schiffe in Djibouti liegen.
You know that we have these two ships in Djibouti. They are being maintained and they are waiting, but they, of course, will not wait forever. Right now, there doesn't seem to be any scenario in the past days or weeks for this situation to resolve quickly and for our ships to demine or minesweep the Strait of Hormuz. There will not be an unauthorized minesweeping in the Strait of Hormuz. We've heard that from the French president. And this means we will not leave our ships there, as I said, waiting forever. But maybe we will decide that our personnel will spend their time in Berlin at 40 degrees and not 50 degrees in Djibouti. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank. Damit ist die Pressekonferenz zu Ende. Vielen Dank für Ihr Interesse.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you again. We're here, of course, with the Prime Minister of Latvia this afternoon. So we'll start with a statement by the Secretary General, followed by a statement from the Prime Minister, and then we'll have time for your questions.
Prime Minister Koolberg, dear Andries, again, congratulations on your appointment. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to NATO headquarters. And let me say this. Latvia is a highly valued ally. And every day since Latvia joined NATO, which is now 22 years ago, the alliance has protected, of course, your sovereignty and security. As we saw that just last week, French jets deployed for NATO Baltic air policing intercepted and destroyed a drone that entered Latvia's airspace. And such drone incidents on NATO's eastern flank show Russia's dangerous and reckless actions. But it also shows once again NATO's determination and ability to deter and to defend. No ally stands alone in NATO. Latvia hosts NATO Forward Land Forces, a brigade led by Canada with troop contributions from 12 other allies. That is NATO solidarity in action. Latvia leads by example on defense investment, with core defense spending due to reach almost 5% of GDP this year. And you are also strengthening your defense industrial base, with focus on drone technology and counter-drone systems. You have become a true hub for innovation in this critical area. Latvia is a strong supporter of Ukraine. It continues to provide essential support, including through its co-leadership of the International Drone Capability Coalition. That has already delivered contracts for 30,000 drones, many produced in Latvia. And just last week, you signed a defense cooperation agreement with President Zelensky to share expertise. Prime Minister, today we discussed the priorities for the NATO summit in Ankara that is only 3 weeks away. And the summit will be about delivery. Delivering increased defense investments, more defense production, and of course our strong support for Ukraine. Latvia is already showing how it's done. I expect other allies to demonstrate how they are turning extra spending into combat-ready capabilities and how they are scaling up their defense industries. I count on allies to go further and faster because we face a more dangerous world. Latvia's resolve is an example to us all. And we are all safer and stronger when we stand together in NATO. Prime Minister Koolbergs, dear Andries, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you all. Dear Secretary General Mark, in the 5 minutes we met, I learned that I have a lot to learn from Mark because he's been Prime Minister for 14 years, and today I'm Prime Minister for 14 working days. So, and yes, and we learned that we actually have much more in common from Dutch perspective, from Riga, from Latvia, and our common